Today's shout out is for Zuldinga. Ojer Axonil versus Kinnan, Aminatou, and the Mycotyrant. We have a 2-lander Ruby Medallion. Ren's Resolve is a means of card advantage. Yeah, got pretty much everything in our opening hand that we need here. Means of ramp, a means of card advantage. And we even draw into another land on our first turn. Start off with the Valakut coming into play tapped. Delighted Halfling on turn 1 for the Mycotyrant. And a big score which we'll be able to get down pretty quickly, assuming that we actually hold on to any of this ramp that we get down, which is a big if on Magic Online. And down comes the Mycotyrant on turn 2, thanks to throwing out an Urborg. If the client would like to catch up, an Urborg makes all of our lands swamps. And for some reason on Magic Online it gives us back the text box on the full art lands whenever you turn it into a swamp or any other land type, which is, yeah, not as aesthetically pleasing as we would like. Doesn't do it on these ones though, weirdly. Anyway, a Spirited Companion for Aminatou will draw a card when it enters. And we see another commander in Kinnan come down on turn 2, as you would expect. Hadn't seen any kind of dorks or mana rocks yet though. And there is a Swiftfoot Boots, so if we play the Mountain, and then we've got a rock that is red here, so that will cost 1 less, which is useful. Which means we could go for a 3-mana commander, equip up the Swiftfoot Boots next turn, which I think will be fine. And then we can start setting up the ping effects with things like Eidolon and the Firebrand Archer. A Generous Emp being discarded for Forest Cycling and then playing out the forest straight away. Oh, actually, not playing the forest out straight away, he went after a Bayou with that. Casting a Life from the Loam in order to grab back a land. And the Mycotyrant did see a permanent go in the bin this turn, so making some fungus. Okay, blue mana being held up by Aminatou, so it may well be that we get our commander countered, unfortunately. Mox Amber is the first rock being played into Kinnan, so 2, 4 and 5 mana available. And throwing in an Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. Might be able to get an extra land from that. Okay, more blue mana being held up by our opponents. That is a Jeska's Will. We can make 6 mana with that. So we'd have 6, 8 mana this turn. Probably get a land for 9 mana. This assumes that we can exile the top cards with our commander in play. I think we just have to try it. Priority is being held up by Aminatou. Okay, but it's allowed down. Try to get the Swiftfoot Boots on here. Might see removal as opposed to counter magic. Okay, but that's allowed in, that's excellent. So, just need to pray that we don't see any kind of edict effect or board wipe now. Going to hold back the 4/4, we're not all that interested in combat damage. Preferably in this deck, we want to buff the power if we can, and then do slight ping effects with things like the Firebrand Archer. But even with it just being a 4/4, dealing a bunch of 1 damage pings will mount up, because they'll all become 4 damage as opposed to just 1. The Riveteer's Outlook being played again, and our opponent did go for dredging back the Life from the Loam, so there's a Mycoloth in the bin, an Old Rustine, and the Great Henge as well. So definitely making some fungus this turn. And then playing the World Shaper, just 1 land in the bin at the moment, but this has to die in order to get the lands back anyway. Mycotyrant triggering again. We've got quite a few ping effects that deal 1 damage to all creatures, so we should be able to deal with these fungus easily enough. It's noteworthy that they can't block. There's a Reckoner's Bargain. Sacrificing the dog in order to draw 2 cards. Not typically an effect that I would expect to see from Aminatou. Alright, there's a Toxic Deluge, so no wonder our opponent let it down. We will not put it back in the command zone. Let's try flipping round the Axonil. Not sure if we're going to be able to deal enough damage. It needs to be 4. And then we pay the 3 to flip it back round. Bajukabog being played after that, and going after exiling the Kinnan's graveyard to get rid of the Uro. Argument to be made for going over here as well. It's obvious that a dredge deck would go after the graveyard at some point, but Uro's an issue as well. Now we do control our commander for the Jeska's Will, it's just in the form of a land, so hopefully Magic Online will actually recognise the commander being in play here. Thran Dynamo from the Kinnan player. Difficult to keep Kinnan out of play with it being a very cheap one. Okay, managed to make a mountain. So play the mountain. Firebrand Archer is 1. Can we play 4 non-creatures into this? We might be able to. Will we be able to afford the Temple of Power 3 mana though? There's 6 cards over here, so maybe. I think now might be just as good a time as any. I'll save the Glistening Stockpile just in case we're desperate for the additional mana. We are allowed to select both on the Jeska's Will, so that's good. Obviously, like I said, we do control our commander, so Firebrand Archer deals the first point of damage we need to deal. And then we see we have Delayed Blast Fireball. 6 mana available. Let's go for the Unexpected Windfall, maybe? Do we have to discard the Eidolon? Yeah, we might have to, unfortunately. So we'll draw 2 additional cards and make 2 treasures here. There is a Sulfuric Vortex I don't mind seeing. So play the Vortex for 2 mana. Yeah, that means so far we've played Jeska's Will, the Windfall, the Sulfuric Vortex, and the 4th piece of damage could just be the Wren's Resolve. We've got until our next turn to play the cards. So yeah, let's do that. And there is a Spell Shock, which is really good. Vandal Blast should be good as well. So go for the activation on this. Transforming our commander, it comes into play tapped because it is a tap ability. And we can afford the Swiftfoot Boots as well. So managed quite nicely there. Definitely want to get Spell Shock into play though. Sulfuric Vortex going to deal 2 damage to everyone during each of their turns. So it will be 4 damage instead because we have a 4-power creature. Worldly Tutor may well be a Reclamation Sage for Swiftfoot or something like that. Instead it is Oracle of Muldiah. Sulfuric Vortex keeps people from gaining life as well. Playing out the Oracle of Muldiah straight away. We saw a Sol Ring on top there, but it was shuffled away. A Dread Return on top now, because they just played a fetch land. And then Life from the Loam goes after some more fetches. So they've got Fabled Passage is a good one, Marsh Flats, and the one from Capenna that comes into play and sacks itself straight away, which does have added utility. The problem with regular fetches is that if they come into play tapped, then you have to wait a turn to crack them, and you lose a life with things like Marsh Flats as well. But with those Capenna ones, they come into play tapped, sacrifice themselves, and you gain a life. So, yeah, they're not the worst fetches in the world. They don't get the due that they deserve. Sulfuric Vortex during the upkeep again. There's a Mind Stone ready to get wrapped up in the Vandal Blast potentially. Not sure if I pointed this card out either. This is Volcanic Fallout, quite an old card, an instant, 2 damage to everyone and every creature. Can't be countered, and obviously that will get buffed up on the players, not the creatures. It'll still be 2 damage on the creatures, but Axonil's power will be dealt to everyone else. I've got the feeling everyone's looking at us, but yeah, Kinnan's not to be taken lightly. Has the mana to activate the Kinnan here. And looks like he's just aiming to do it at instant speed. Could force the issue by overloading the Vandal Blast. We'll see what we draw into. Sulfuric Vortex deals 2 damage to us as well, but only 2 damage. Alright, there's an Ancient Tomb, which could make things easier. So that could be a 4 mana Vandal Blast, a 2 mana Spell Shock, and then the 1 mana doesn't do anything in particular. But we could tap down Ancient Tomb for a black thanks to the Urborg. So yeah, let's tempt our opponents by going for the overloaded Vandal Blast. That will deal 4 damage to our opponents again. Didn't go for too many instants and sorceries pingers in this deck. I think I've got about 25 instants and sorceries, but I prefer them to be punishments for my opponents doing stuff. And obviously this is non-creature, so there's a hell of a lot more stuff that can trigger this. I think there's a couple of non-creature pingers in the deck as well. Looks like we're forcing our opponent to go for the Kinnan. So yeah, there we are. The Mind Stone was cracked by Aminatou as well. Kinnan wouldn't be able to afford his ability after the rocks have gone down. But managing to get into Ulamog, that does not count as a cast, so don't get the cast trigger at least, but yeah, I've got Annihilator to deal with now. So hopefully some of this exile will come out of Aminatou's hand and onto the Ulamog. Might make a deal with him to have the Ulamog swinging at us though. Alright, and there is a Cyclonic Rift, excellent, going on to the Ulamog, which will force them to recast it. That's excellent. The rocks getting wiped out should hurt the Kinnan. Play the Ancient Tomb, and we'll go for this 2 mana Spell Shock, Ruby Medallion, doing a lot of work for us this game. And as tempted as I am to swing in with the Axonil, I really want to swing in at Kinnan, but I don't trust that he won't have a flash creature that he can gang up with. Let's go in at the Mycotyrant. We're at a decent enough life total where it shouldn't matter if we take a few hits. Alright, so our opponent's down to roughly the same life totals. Haven't managed to buff our commander yet, unfortunately. That would be ideal. We do have equipment in the deck for that reason. So we've managed to burn the Mycotyrant down to 16 by turn 6. It's not bad going considering there's no buffs. Decided to mill away the Dread Return, along with, if Magic Online will allow us to look. Life from the Loam also milled away Gaia's Cradle and a Command Tower. Riveter's Outlook back into play. Another piece of tech you can do with this, it does come into play untapped when you play it from hand, so you can float some black mana on an Urborg or some mana from a Chromatic Lantern or something like that before it gets sacrificed. Our opponent didn't do it there, but that is something else that you can do with that land. Mycotyrant back into play, 4 more damage on the Spell Shock. Got very high hopes for Spell Shock. Run it in a few of my burn decks over the years. He's only got 3 more spells in him. Playing and potentially cracking the Fabled Passage, yep. So shuffling away the Nature's Law, revealing to us a Sol Ring again. And Mycotyrant going to make a bunch of saps. It's 4 saprolings thanks to the Descend. Aminatou down to 15 and unable to gain life. Solemn Simulacrum hardly worth 4 life, but it does suggest that our opponent doesn't have much else. So if we get round to our next turn, we may well be able to get our opponents. Still blue mana being held up by the Aminatou player. And Kinnan managing to make a land, which means he can afford to go for the ability. And the abilities, like I said before, they don't count as casting, so you just put them onto the battlefield, meaning you can avoid the Spell Shock. Gonna have to work a bit harder to get rid of Kinnan. But Spell Shock, as it was always intended, is going to be particularly good against the blue players that want to counter everything we do. Haven't seen any counter magic yet, but I'm assuming that our opponents have it. So whatever we draw into here is likely going to be discarded to big score, I would think. We'll see what it is. Hammer of Nizan is tempting, but I don't think my opponents have destruction magic anyway, in the form of an Edict or a board wipe. Tempting to play it though, but I think big score is going to be a more intelligent idea. So I'll just put the 2 life into Ancient Tomb because I'm not sure how much mana we're going to need this turn. Discard the hammer. Noteworthy that the hammer pulls double duty. It is, well, triple duty actually. It's indestructible, buffs the power, and it cheats equip costs. Like I said before, we do have equipment in the deck to buff our commander's power. So Firebrand Archer counts there. Spell Shot will deal 2 damage to us only. And it's 4 damage on the big score with Firebrand Archer. Priority being held by Aminatou. Alright, big score draws us into an Abrade, which we can throw onto the Kinnan. So yeah, Lightning Bolt the Kinnan, I think, for just 1 mana. And again, it's 2 damage to us from the shock, 4 damage with Firebrand Archer. And then each of these 2 players will take 4 damage to the Sulphuric Vortex, assuming it stays in play as well. Although, if they want to play a spell to get rid of the Sulphuric Vortex, they'll have to do it quick because this is going to deal 4 damage to them when they cast something. So, looking like we've got rid of these 2 players. And that player just deciding to scoop. Looks as though we'll see an activation from Kinnan. Okay, it is Dispel. Let's see here, 4, 5 and 6. This is 7, isn't it? Yeah, 7 to activate that. So I think that leaves us free to just swing in with the Axonil. Yeah, should be able to just swing in with Axonil towards this player. I just need to hope that he doesn't have a means of getting in a big flashy creature to block with, but we'll test him here. We're pretty close to a victory. Our opponents have a lot of things they need to deal with at this point. And our opponent decides to take it, so yep, goes down to 3. And the beautiful thing is, we either land with this, or we land with the ability, even if the Volcanic Fallout did get countered, which it can't be anyway. It could be bounced back to hand or something, or the spell could be exiled. Then if they did cast a spell, a counter spell, they'd get shot by this, and then they've got to deal with this during the upkeep. It's a hell of a lot of pings that we've managed to have our opponents be forced to deal with here. So finish off the other player, go for the Volcanic Fallout. Kinnan decided to scoop on us. We'll wipe our opponent's board while we're at it. A little bit of a numbo, the Volcanic Fallout. It does take out little creatures like the Firebrand Archer, but the Archer did a hell of a lot of work for us that game. Luckily didn't see too much more interaction after the Toxic Deluge. Our opponent was looking for an overrun effect with the Nissa, but was never going to get that thanks to the instant Pyroclasm here. So yeah, that would have been a very, very different game if we hadn't managed to get the extra damage in order to flip the land back round into a creature. Wasn't positive we were going to be able to do that, but with the card draw that we had available in hand, I was hopeful that we would, and luckily it paid off for us. Every single turn counts in Commander nowadays, and not having to recast our Commander from the command zone and then have it sat there unprotected for a while, it makes all the difference in the world. Hopefully you all enjoyed this visit to Ojer Axonil, and I will see you all in the next one. Big thank you to the patrons as always. I'm Tribalkai. Thank you for watching.